Do you want to be doing anything back by the airlines between the truck and trailer when they're doing a tug test? No, probably not. So don't do anything with A, B, or C when a truck is doing an in-cab. That way you guys reduce your risk of getting injured somehow, okay? Always referring back to that safe stick 6. I got 2 stickers on either side of my truck that lets you guys, as a reminder, every day, okay? A little bit of common sense goes a long way in the trucking industry. So we'll go ahead and start with section A. A starts with the hood down, because we're going to check, first thing we're going to check is our cab markers, our clearance lights up on the top. The marker lights, all 5, are properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, damaged, or missing, and they are amber in color. If something has a color, you need to list it. Again, amber in color. Come down to my headlights. Both sides, you only need to check the one. Headlights, properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, damaged, or missing. Nothing's broken. Headlights are white or clear in color. And the side marker turn signal is amber. Last thing we want to do before we open the hood, check underneath for any sort of leaks or debris from our truck. We shouldn't have anything leaking. If we have something leaking, we got bad parts, bad hoses, what have you. So just make sure you don't have oil, coolant, anything like that on the ground. Then you'll unlatch the hood. And how many people want to open the hood from the front? Raise your hands. Okay. It's not necessarily a wrong way to do it, but there's a better way. When you open the hood from the front, these are gas shock assisted, so they're a little bit easier, but I weigh 200 pounds and it's pretty hard to open the hood just leaning like this. Plus, what happens if it's a windy day? The hood can come flying up, smack you right in the head. So, how we want you guys to open the hood is you can do it from either side, but come to the back of the wheel well. You can lift the foot up with one hand, and you're out of the way of the line of it opening, so you won't get hit in the head if the wind happens to take it. So on the passenger side, what we want to check is our alternator. Now, on the test, a lot of people start getting a little bit worried, test jitters, and they point to this right here. This is not your alternator. We can tell that by what are the lines coming into it.
Air conditioner.
AC. It's an AC condenser.
AC conditioning.
Our alternator is underneath of it. It's right here. You probably see a little bit better right here. So the alternator is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken. Securely mounted. It is also belt driven. Speaking of the belt is right here. You can also see it up here. The belt is not cracked, damaged, or frayed, and has between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch of play. I believe your study guide's just listed as no more than 3/4 inch, but what happens if a belt is too tight? It'll snap. What happens if it's too loose?
Fall off.
It'll fall off. So you want to have a tolerance in there. 1/2 inch to 3/4 is what you're looking for. That way you got some snugness, but it's got some room to flex. How you check it? Really nice and easy. Engine's off. Just grab the belt and kind of wiggle it back and forth a little bit. Does it feel like it's going to fall off, or does it feel like it's going to snap like a drum string? And then before we forget the alternator, you just want to check the wires going into the back, making sure they're properly mounted and secured. On the test, this is all you need to worry about on the passenger side. Some of you that have CDLs or maybe have tested other places are kind of baffled by that.
Which one is the belt again?
Real baffled. Right here.
You got the
Same as it would be in a car. It's a serpentine belt. So, other things you're going to want to know is up here is your air filter, and then you got your air filter hose, if you would, or your air intake hose. You want to make sure there's no cracks in this. It's really important there's no cracks in this, because this is behind the filter. If you're sucking air in through here, you're sucking debris right into the turbo. It's a real easy way to destroy the turbo. Check the lines and everything going into the turbo and the exhaust system. The front of the exhaust is right here behind it. You also want to check air coolant lines. Go into the air coolant or cooler. And then your washer fluid. Make sure the reservoir is not leaking and it's full. It's got liquid in it. Again, this stuff is not on your test. It's just stuff I want you guys to know where it's at so you know what you're looking at when you need to. On your test, alternator and belt. That's it. Everything else we want to check, over to the other side. Careful when you come around. These mirrors hurt.
You hit them a time or two?
You learn real quick. So everybody, we went through the in-cab and kind of a typewriter motion, left to right. Well, I kind of like to keep that same scheme throughout the rest of what I'm doing, but I change it up just a little bit. When I get to one system, I like to follow a system from start to finish. That way I don't forget anything in that. Because if we look here, just for example, the coolant reservoir. If I start going everything in a typewriter bottom to top, I might forget a coolant line way down here. But if I follow the system from start to finish, I shouldn't forget anything. So, I'm gonna check my coolant reservoir. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking, and filled to the proper level. It actually looks like the shop overfilled it just a hair. Nonetheless, cap, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or leaking, securely fitted to the tank. Come down and I'm gonna check my coolant lines. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking. And then I have my water pump right here. Water pump's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking. My water pump is also belt driven. We'll come over. I got my fuel fill, my oil fill. My oil fill is properly mounted and secured. There's no cracks, damages, or leaks, and the cap is securely fitted, and there's no leaks. I have my oil dipstick, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking. I do not believe for the test you have to open it or pull it out, but in my mind, how are you going to check the condition if you don't pull it out?
Right.
You can't. So I always like to, how I usually check it on a day-to-day is I'll have a rag, I'll pull it out, wipe it off, stick it back in, and then I'll check it. But check the condition of the oil. This was just running, so you're not going to get the most accurate reading, but you're checking the level and the condition of it. What is the color? What is the viscosity? What is the condition of it? It should be a nice, clean black color. Yeah. There should be no shiny metal shavings, and there should be no bubbles or milky color to it. If there's bubbles, you're getting air into the oil system somehow. If it's milky, there's coolant running into it somewhere. So you're just checking the condition of it. If everything looks clean and at proper level, oil's good to go. So I mentioned to a couple of you guys, you check some things in your car. Some things look the same as the oil. If it doesn't look right in your car, it's probably not going to look right here. A lot of pre-trip is just kind of basic maintenance knowledge. If you don't know any of that, it's not hard to learn. If you know how to properly maintain equipment, it's going to catch on pretty easy. And if you're using your phone for anything other than a video right now, please put it away. So now we got our oil fill and our oil dipstick. Next in the line is going to be our air compressor. You guys can kind of filter around. It's right here. It's just behind the frame rail, behind the fuel filter, the fuel pump. So it's right here, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, and there's no leaks. Must have cleaned everything up in here. It looks pretty shiny. Next I'm going to come over, just like the typewriter, I'm going to start back at my left again. So it's a little bit out of order the way we were going, but we're going left to right following each system. So now I'm down to my power steering reservoir. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, filled to the proper level. Power steering cap, properly fitted, doesn't leak. Follow that down to my power steering lines. Properly mounted and secured, they're not cracked, damaged, or leaking. There's no chafing on the hoses either. Run down into my power steering gearbox. Gearbox is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking. Fluid does run through this. It should not leak. For any reference, anything that deals with a fluid or a gas should not leak. Run that into my 3-piece steering linkage, my drag link and pitman arm. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, or bent. Connecting each piece is my castle nut and my cotter keys. Castle nuts and cotter keys are properly mounted and secured. They're snugly fitted, and the cotter keys are in place. Now, cotter keys are meant to be bent. That's how they stay in place. Castle nuts don't get torqued down very high, so they need something to keep them in place from vibrating loose. For those of you that do not know, a cotter key is a pin that looks kind of like this. It's two legs with an eye hook. You stick it through the hole, and then you just take each of the prongs or the leg and then spread it so it doesn't slip out. So they're gonna look like this, bent out, everything which way.
Like a bobby pin.
Sort of. So that's why if you're looking at a cotter key and it's bent, it's the way it's meant to be. Once you're done with the steering system, there's nothing more over this way we really got to check. So we come back to our left. Behind that is our spring mount. My spring mount is properly mounted and secure. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken. Connected to that, I have my leaf spring going from mount to mount. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, or bent. Connecting my leaf spring to my axle are my U-bolts. U-bolts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, and the nuts underneath are snugly fitted. Anybody know why they're called U-bolts? Shaped like a U. So we got our U-bolts. Next is our shock. Shock is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking. Shocks are typically hydraulic or gas. You can't really tell if a gas shock is leaking because it doesn't really make noise. But hydraulic shocks, if they're leaking, you'll have hydraulic fluid everywhere. If it's leaking, it's bad. Get it replaced. So that's our suspension system from front to back. Now I'm going to move on to the brakes. Got my airlines. Airlines are properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, damaged, broken, or leaking, and they're not chafing on anything. But I have my brake chamber right here. It's just behind the tire for those of you who cannot see it. My brake chamber is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, damaged, broken in any way, and it's not leaking. Anybody tell me what kind of brakes are on the front of this truck by looking at the chamber? Disc or drum?
Drum.
How many people think disc? How many people think drum? How many people think you're right? There's disc brakes on the front of this truck. We can tell just by looking at the brake chamber, and I'll show you guys more of that when we get toward the back when they get bigger. It's a little bit easier to see when they're bigger. But disc brake chambers are always going to be perpendicular to the frame. Drum brake chambers are always going to be parallel with it. They're going to run with it. We can tell by looking at the collar here on the brake chamber. See how it wraps around this way? That means the brake chamber goes this way. It's marrying the two halves together. If it was a drum going this way, it would marry this way. So you can tell it's nothing you need to know for the test. It's just something you can look at to know exactly what style brakes you're inspecting. So I know I'm inspecting disc brakes. With disc brakes, how many people know what a disc brake on a car looks like? Exactly the same on a semi, they're just bigger. You got a pad, two pads, a caliper, and a rotor. They do the exact same thing in the exact same way. So you're checking your pads and your calipers and your rotor. Everything is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken. The pads and the rotors are clean and free of any debris. Once you inspect the brakes, then you can come up to the tire. You got your sidewalls and then the top. The overall condition of the tire is ABC. There's no abrasions, bulges, or any cuts. The tire is in good overall health. There's no missing tread depth. The tread is evenly worn, and the tread depth is more than how much?
430 seconds.
430 seconds. Has any of you ever used a tire tread depth gauge? Okay, you guys know how small 430 seconds looks like? It's pretty small.
Pretty small, yeah.
30 seconds is 1 inch. So you break that 1 inch up into 32 even segments, and you add 4 of them together. That's how much 4 30 seconds is. I have one in my car. If you guys like, I can go grab it here at the end of the inspection, and I can show you physically what 4 30 seconds actually looks like. It's a little unnerving when you actually see it. But more than, there's a couple different ways you can explain that. Try to stay away from the double negatives. A lot of people will go, I have no less than, which is not a wrong way to say it, but when you get test jitters, you forget the no more than, less than. You say, I have less than. So just stick to, I have more than 4 30 seconds. Also, my tire is properly inflated to the manufacturer's specification, or if you have a sticker on the rim for company recommendation, to that level. Check with an air pressure gauge. Now, how many of you guys have used an air pressure gauge on your car tires? Does anybody know what PSI those go up to?
About 50.
About 50. How much do we think this tire gets inflated to?
From
90 to 100.
120 and back 110.
Manufacturer's specification is a maximum of 120 PSI.
Yeah, 120, yes.
Ours recommendation is 110. Do we think we could check that with a normal
No.
tire pressure gauge?
Probably blow the stick right
So
up.
it's going to cost you a few bucks. But you can pick one of these up. You can pick one of these up. Yes.
On the car, look at the jam size
Well, we can take a look at the door jam if you want. And that's where a lot of the company recommendations come from. Manufacturer's spec is the maximum PSI that tire can be inflated to. But if we look at the door, if it's here, sometimes we're not on it. 120 PSI is the maximum recommendation. So Hirschbach has it at 110 because it's close to, but it gives you just a slightly smoother ride because there's a little bit of flex in that tire. The reason why this air pressure gauge looks like this is you got the top that looks like normally you can just poke it right in just like that. But when you get a dual tire, how are you going to check the dual tire when it's facing inward like this? You've got the other side that you can pull against the valve stem and still get the reading. These pressure gauges go up to 150, so you have more than enough gauge to check for your air pressure. They're a little bit pricey. I think they're about $10 or $15 a piece, but it's the only way you can check your air pressure. So it's going to be something you want to keep in your toolbox, in your safety box. Same with a tire tread depth gauge. Keep one on hand, that way you can check it every so often. Once you check the inflation on your tire, now we move down to the rim. My rim, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken in any way. There's no illegal welds or spider cracks between my air vents or my lug nuts, here or here. My air vents are also clean and free of debris. Why is it important those are clean and free?
Air.
So they cool the brakes down. These brakes are air cooled. So if these are all plugged up with snow, debris, what have you, your brakes are going to get hot and they're going to have no way to cool down.
Failure.
Hot brakes are not good brakes. Have any of you ever experienced brake fade or failure in a car?
Yep.
You don't want it to happen in a semi. Believe me, it is. You'll lose the driver's seat. That's all I gotta say. My lug nuts are all properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, damaged, bent, or broken, and there's no silver threads or rust trails indicating that they may be loose. And then lastly, I have my oil hub seal. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, and it is not leaking. There is if you clean it off a little bit, there is a sight glass here where you can check the level. If you need to add some, I believe it's just universal gear oil. You can always check with your shop, but you just pop this rubber cap off and give it a little pop off if it needs something. And that would be section A. Like I said before, running that typewriter motion, but following a system from start to finish. You know, I got that coolant, the reservoir, the cap, down to the lines and into the water pump. Don't need to worry about the radiator, but you will want to check that on your day-to-day. Your power steering, I ran that from the top, the reservoir to the cap, down the lines, the gearbox, and then my steering linkages. Suspension, run that from front to back. That's all one piece. Brakes, run that from the air lines into the chamber to the brake itself. Then the tire, down to the rim. Work yourself in a motion that's always coming out or moving down. Your study guides are set up just a little bit differently. They're just kind of right down the line. They're just boom, 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 just like that. Follow a flow. However you guys learn best, that is the right answer.
Excuse me. I didn't see where you pointed out the water pump or the vehicle question.
Yes, sure thing. Water pump right here.